Hello, everyone, and welcome back to the next episode of Stream Time Sports. My name is Chris Stone, the Community League, joined as always by our CEO, Nick Meacham. Now, Nick, I had a little check. I believe it will be Monday, will be the autumn solstice. And for those that don't know, I studied history as an undergraduate. My particular area that I found most interesting, or where I did my dissertation things, was around medieval European history. And the Vikings are my favorite group of historical
Really?
figures. Yeah, I love Vikings. And when I think of Sweden, I think of Vikings. When I think of Vikings, I think of pagan traditions. And when I think of things like the solstice, I think of, pagans and Vikings. And I'm just curious, Nick, do they do anything in Sweden around the autumn solstice or any of the solstices? I just, maybe that's a stereotype, but I'd be curious to know if there's anything going on that, maybe your kids are going to do in school.
I've not heard anything yet, actually. Now you've got me wondering. There is one thing that I'm just checking if it's when they do something. I think that's earlier in the year, which I think we completely missed. It's
Yeah.
like the crayfish party.
I feel like there's got to be some sort of traditions. I'd be really disappointed if they'd lost their ways.
Maybe no one talks about it, and it just something just happens. When is that? That's a great question. From what I understand, no. All I can tell you though, it is getting bleak here fast. Yeah. We're losing 5 minutes a day, 5 minutes a day of sunlight, and now the mornings are pitch black. Whereas just a month ago, I think we lose something like 2.5 hours. Did I say that in the last pod?
We had a podcast where I think it was during the summer solstice, perhaps, where we were talking about like basically every day you were gaining. Like,
yeah, well, what goes up must come down.
Yeah,
Chris.
yeah.
What goes up must come down. And now we're definitely on the downward trend. No, I don't know if there's anything specific, though. There is the crayfish party, the Kräftskiva, it's called, and that is something that happens to mark the end of summer. But I've just had a quick look, and that is typically held at the end of August.
So just missed it.
Just missed it. I have to say my experience of it was a bit mixed. Just basically with shellfish, small, smelly. It's not my bag, have to be honest. But no, they definitely basically what happens in now. I've got told, and I've been here loads of times, is people just start going into hibernation over the coming months. So literally, you just start seeing people less and less, and they live what they call more of a mysigt life, which basically means cozy. You'll never hear the word cozy more than you will in Sweden.
Where?
So music and njuta, which means basically you have to enjoy things. Njuta is to enjoy stuff. So have a music house, which basically means candles everywhere, there's candles, lights in every window. It is quite pretty, but it is pretty bleak for a few months. So this will be my first full winter. I've done a couple of months here before, and that was quite a cool experience, actually, because I was staying at my in-laws' place, and what I basically did, I got into running, and so I would run every other day, and sometimes the weather would be around 0, the next day would be -10, and sometimes I was running in snow, compact snow, and other times it was super wet. And it was just an interesting dynamic to go from. And I never got hot till I finished the run. Basically, after the run, I started to warm up, but otherwise I was freezing the whole way around. But it was I enjoy running in the icy cold conditions. So that's something I'm looking forward to nostalgically. I've stopped running now intentionally to make sure I get more excited when it's time.
Well, one thing I want to do, and I don't know if it's anywhere near you in Sweden, but I'm sure the Instagram reels I have seen, the places where you can go out in like a cabin in the woods and like have a pack of huskies and go out there and just mush and just be fun to be on a dog drawn. God, why can't I think of the word for when you go do that? There's just
husky sledding.
Yeah. They're just
I've done that
dogs.
before.
It looks fun. I mean,
I've done that before. I did it in the Arctic Circle in Finland. Nice. Really cool experience. But you've got to be quite a way up north. Now, for context, I think it's like at least 10, 11 hours north from here. Before you get to the Arctic Circle, I think, from memory. So it's a long way up north. But I did reindeer and husky sledding, ice fishing, a couple of other things I can't remember now. It was a long time ago. It was a really cool experience. I would highly recommend doing something like that as a thing. Problem is, where I live, actually the snow comes and goes quite a lot because it's quite south. So it's not quite
Right there.
as beautifully snowy, and we live near the sea, and the snow basically just the air takes everything away. So it's not quite as idealistic as you would think.
Yeah. Well, not just, flipping it on the complete opposite, Nick, not just talking about the winter and the Arctic. We had a hot event last week on the beach. That beach being in Amsterdam at
Great segue.
IBC. Oh, I know. Just I'm getting better with age and time and just but yes, we had a stream time event at the beach at IBC. You and I were not able to attend, but I saw the videos, saw all the photos. Looked like a very busy place. Lots of our members there, which is always very exciting and intersection of the industry. But Nick, maybe just your sort of highlights as well, just like from an IBC perspective and sort of where that sits in and just being able to host that event within there.
Yeah, we've always been interested in doing something out at the IBC event. We normally send a couple of people out to the event. It's an event, now for context for those listening who aren't familiar with it, there's like nearly 40,000 people to go to it. It's a very tech-heavy broadcast show. It's not really a place where a lot of sports go, but there is some there because at 40,000, you'll get some people that are interested in crossover into that space. And we were keen to do something there and see what the appetite was like. And also, when talking to our members that we have as part of the Streamtime community, it's an important date in their diaries in a lot of for a lot of them. So we were excited to do our first experience out there. I think they had well over 120 people attend. All members are invited as part of their membership, and then we invited some select people within our community. A big shout out to our partners for that event, led by MediaKind and FX Digital and alike, and Two Coders. I can't remember the last one, so sorry about that. But you got exposure on the day. But no, it was a good experience to get to see that sort of come to fruition, and I'm pretty bullish about doing something a little bit bigger out there next year. So for those that are listening or interested, get in touch if you want to share your thoughts on what we should do out there. But I've already got some ideas percolating, so you have to wait and see.
Ooh, and then I know there's some whispers, in the background, potentially in a Stream Time Golf Day. We'll see if that happens, but we're always open to all ideas.
We're always open to all ideas. The golf thing, my problem is that since I moved over here, I've been itching to play golf, and all I've done is play at the par 3 course with my son, where I just take basically a pitching wedge and a putter, and that's all I need for the whole round. So I haven't done enough training if we're going to take that. So I'm going to have to dust off those clubs and get out there a little bit more. But he's already got a better swing than me, so maybe I'll just send him out on my behalf instead.
Yeah, it's just that flexibility they have when they're that young. I can't, rotate my back that way.
It's ridiculous. I'm looking at I can't move my hips like quarter of the way around that I'm supposed to, and he's hyperextending them. It's ridiculous. But anyway, to be young again.
To be young. So, Nick, moving into the news stories, the first one we're going to start with, or I'm going to take us, is on the Netflix Canelo Crawford fight that took place over the weekend. The numbers that came out, looking at 41 million global viewers across the day. The average minute audience, which I'm sure you can explain to people what that means. I'm sure probably fairly logical, but, they're coming up with new stats all the time. Nick had that at 36.6 million. The U.S. audience was 20.3 million. For those that, if you're not following Nick on LinkedIn, go do it. You did a big, long post. But I do think one of the interesting things you came up with that is the week prior, we talked about the YouTube game that NFL hosted there and the sort of disparity between the U.S. and the rest of the world. I just said there's 41 million viewers here. They were talking about the U.S. audience is 20 million. So far more global audience. It didn't match the numbers that the Mike Tyson, Jake Paul fight had, but still we're not talking about insignificant numbers. And I think another point that the pay-per-view model may be in for a struggle long term. But Nick, just looking at that Canelo fight, being on Netflix again, they keep adding more and more events, the boxing events, the NFL games. They're just adding more events and looking like any doubts that may have been, how can an on-demand video platform survive with the large streaming challenges when you're doing live sports? They keep knocking them off, Nick.
Yeah, look, I have this weird feeling that in years from now, what we're going to see is not only people like Netflix and YouTube hosting more live sports, but I think they will basically be able to hold some of these sports to ransom. Maybe not a few years, but down the line and say, hey, we can guarantee you 40 million viewers to your event if you give us your rights for free. And that's what I think is going to happen at some stage. YouTube are kind of already doing that a little bit, but that's why the NFL case of where they actually put some money on the table was interesting. But I think that was done to prove the business case themselves that they could do it. But I just think that the power that like Netflix has to generate an audience for, in some instances, boxing is so primal and so easy to follow in the same way I would say like football is in terms of from a sporting perspective, that anyone can watch it and engage with that. And it was a really big matchup, like two of the best in the for this generation, basically fighting against each other. But if you're, because of the legacy of pay-per-view and what it's done to, I guess, driving down awareness of the sport and focusing on those super fans to pay the pay-per-view price that has been asked of them, to see them now ramp up these numbers to the scale that they did, I still find really impressive. Now, the Tyson Paul fight, I mean, that shows what happens when you've got big brands and names with stardom behind them. You can you can get anyone to anything, basically, because obviously it wasn't a legitimate fight. And that record may never be broken. But I saw that Netflix were very quick to outline this was the number one most viewed boxing championship ever. So they're trying to create their own narrative now. I think they're now trying to softly shift away from the Tyson thing a little bit when they can. But yeah, the 41 million is massive. That over half the audience was outside the US, I think is super interesting also because of the time zone thing. It was a late night fight in the US. I'd love to know. And I think the numbers were top 10 on Netflix in 91 different countries and number one on Netflix in 30 countries. That just shows the pulling power and their ability to drive audiences to the sport. I'm not just going to say it's boxing. Boxing's done well here, but Netflix's ability to drive people to those, I think, also has to be really commended. So, yeah, some big numbers. On the AMA side, average minute audience is what it sounds like. It's the average audience on a per minute basis, and that is now the what you call it the go-to streaming measure that most are using.
The benchmark.
The benchmark stat that they're using. I was a little bit confused, and I wrote this in my post about how some of these numbers work. So if anyone can explain it to me, I either think, I don't want to think this is like, I feel like I'm getting on a bit of a high horse now about ratings and data the last couple of weeks with my shots at FIFA and YouTube and the like and the NFL. But the fact they've said they had 41 million global viewers total. So live plus the next 24 hours afterwards. Then a 24 million peak concurrent and then 36.6 million average minute audience. Now, what I struggle with is how can you have 36.6 million average, the 24 million peak concurrent? So if anyone is listening can answer that question for me, because they do not sound logical. And I asked ChatGPT to help me before I posted about it, like maybe I'm just thinking really stupidly here and missing a trick. But if anyone can explain that number to me, I would really appreciate it.
I agree. I have a similar thought when I hear it, but I just assume someone smarter than me has figured it out, and I'm just gonna trust them, Nick. But one of the things I hope for, Nick, because one of the things we might talk about piracy later in the Stream East story, but like one of the things that they talk about is accessibility. Like that's what drives up piracy. Because I think, there's statistics that's like, 3/4 of people will be willing to pay for something if it was just legally there to be watched. And we talk about what causes piracy, the challenges with it, and it's accessibility. Boxing is different because it's such, you only get these fights once, maybe twice a year, whereas the NFL, the Premier League, like very set schedule. I would just love to see. I know Netflix is not free to air, but it's the lack of the pay-per-view. And it feels like at this point, like Netflix is almost like Wi-Fi, where it's sort of like, it's not free, but like it just feels like such a common commodity that like it almost feels free to air. YouTube quite literally being free to air. I hope other people see this and, maybe Sky starts doing stuff on YouTube where like they might do a Sky game of the week on YouTube or something. I don't know. I'm just pulling things out of the hat, Nick, but I want more stuff that's not behind a paywall.
Yeah. And look, I think the scale of Netflix and other platforms like Prime, which I was going to mention a bit later as well, but the scale of these platforms and their audiences now, it isn't like the days of pay TV versus linear where you're limiting your audience scale. In fact, it's the opposite. Netflix can increase the scale because of their global approach and their ability to make sure that you're in not only in every home in the US for a US based event, but you're also being watched right across the globe, and basically can shift your audience metrics to the number I shared in my post is that the previous Canelo fights that I checked out, they had around 900,000 pay-per-views and 1.2 million. So roughly 40 times the amount of people watched that fight to the pay-per-views. Now that is obviously legal pay-per-views. So let's expect it's double or triple or quadruple that, but still that is more than 10 times consumption on Netflix. So anyway, my point is that sort of level of visibility is enormous for the sport. And I think that the sport will be thrilled that it can drive that value to Netflix, and Netflix can drive that value to them, because they're getting that sort of eyeballs for people like Canelo and Crawford is incredible value for them and their brand longer term as well. So the question ultimately will be, is 40 million enough? Is 40 million enough for Netflix to get value for what they've committed to on the rights, whether it be from both an acquisition and a retention play? And because they have the ability to really focus on double, because they're not just focused on acquisition, because they're such a mature organization and have a mature audience, they can get, I think, enough value out of that 40 million number pretty comfortably. But I'm not an expert in doing all the math on that.
Yeah, I mean, we're going to look at some numbers later on the ratings roundup that we'll talk about. But, that 40 million is significantly higher than the NFL games are going to reference. It's higher than the NASCAR races that we're going to reference. Like, granted, I mentioned boxing is not as frequent. So it's sort of like Wimbledon is great, but Wimbledon's only on for 4 weeks. You're not going to pay as much for an event that's over that span. But, if you're talking about advertiser sponsors, that is not an insignificant number. So, yeah, I think, like I said, I hope it works just purely for the way that I consume sport. I think it'd be great to see more stuff like this. And I imagine you're right, Nick.
Yeah, definitely. I think I agree with you. My other sort of key takeaways from this is I wonder if we can use this measure of, say, this roughly 40 times the viewership as a measure to what to expect from when UFC goes live and sort of part of the Paramount offering. I'd be interested to see if that is roughly the numbers that we're able to get visibility on, if we are able to get visibility on those numbers. And I just thought one other thing that stood out for me is that if these numbers are close to right, these Netflix numbers, I'm still holding my breath that if I'm wrong, I mean, my problem, right? I'm gonna segue here, but my problem is that normally when I'm skeptical about stuff, I'm normally right, and that really annoys me. I actually would rather be wrong about these things. Like, there's too many smart people in the world working in these two organizations, so I feel like I must be wrong about this, and someone can explain it to me. But on the assumption that it is right, that these are the sort of numbers they can produce, I think the closeness of the total numbers to the average minute audience is an incredible result, and shows the stickiness of someone on a Netflix platform. So if someone logs in on Netflix, they're going to be there to stay and to watch what they're watching. I think that's the challenge that YouTube might have, is that ability to keep an audience once they bring them onto the platform, because that's normally not how you use YouTube. You're bouncing between shorter related content. So that's just a little anecdote or a little side part of the conversation, is how sticky is that audience once it does land on a platform, if it is on other ones like a YouTube.
Well, I'll bring it back up later when we talk about that ratings roundup, because I have some thoughts that maybe lead into that. But just to move us on to the next story, we're going to get another update on Ligue. We talked about it's been a crazy couple of years for them, up and down, zone, no to zone, waiting until the last minute to get things sorted out, some sort of partnership distribution with Amazon. But they did launch their own League One streaming platform, and it came at a very reduced rate in terms of pricing. They also had a discounted price for under 26, doing a lot of things to try to make this work. And something we've really not probably seen from a league of their size in their own domestic market. And they had said their goal was to reach 1 million subs by the end of the season, and looking around 2.5 to really 3 million in the long term. By the opening weekend, they reached 600,000, which we thought was a good place to start. According to their reports now, they are now at over 1 million subs. So for them, their goal is to reach that number by the end of the season. They seem to have done that within basically the 4th week of the season. So, Nick, positive signs. Surely, if you set a target, you want to hit it. Maybe sometimes you set the bar low just to smash through it. So, you can tell the narrative, but, you know, surely this has got to be a positive sign.
It's certainly positive. I think there's no way to think, no other way to think about it in terms of being positive of the audience engagement and the adoption. Look, what are the things we can take away from this? Well, firstly, I did a little quick calculation, and roughly DAZN ended up with around 500,000 subscribers, I think was the number that was reported, at about €30 a month.
Yeah, I was say, wasn't
by
cheap.
those calculations, extrapolating at 500,000, let's just say at a static rate.
Yeah,
the number works out to about 180 million of revenue, right, for the year. Again, assuming static, which is not accurate because it's growing, but just for argument's sake. Well, the number that they've developed, the number that they've created now with 1 million followers at around €15 a month with a promo and stuff in place adds up to the exact same number for revenue that DAZN would have as a static measure. So I think it's just quite funny and perhaps interesting just to see that despite the number being over double, well, actually, let's go back to basic economics here.
Yeah.
Okay, economics shows that if you sell something for cheaper, you should get more subscribers. Not a huge shock there. The question is, can they keep that momentum to a place that is significant enough? Like you said, that million was the report of the goal they went for. I am sure that they went for a conservative number in public because they have got so much grief over the last couple of years. There's no way they would have set a goal publicly that was high, and they've probably controlled the narrative on that a little bit. So my guess is that they wanted to, they maybe had expectations that they have requirements that it needs to go higher. That's for sure, because the gap between what they were expected to be earning a few years ago to now, and even the DAZN deal is still quite significant, right? So it's good momentum. 72% people signing up for the full season package is also positive. So people just making the long-term commitment to the platform. But it's still really early days to say like, Ligue is out of hot water, because it's going to be clubs undergoing huge financial pressure over the coming years because they haven't got the media revenues coming in that they expected.
We hope you're enjoying the show. I just want to give a quick shout out to one of our founding Streamtime community members, Lucid Link. Distributed teams, massive files, zero time to waste. In live sports and broadcasting, if you're waiting on files to transfer, sync, or download, you're already losing the race. Lucid Link's cloud-native file system gives your team real-time access to massive media files from anywhere. Say goodbye to syncing and downloading, and hello to instant collaboration, the tools you use every day, like Premiere Pro, DaVinci Resolve, and Media Composer. Whether you're cutting high-res match footage, color grading remotely, or managing production across different time zones, Lucid Link makes remote workflows feel like you're in the same room. From ESPN and McLaren Racing to Warner Brothers and Paramount, production teams trust Lucid Link to create without the wait. Try Lucid Link free today at lucidlink.com and make remote collaboration feel local. Well, let me try to keep spinning this, Nick, in the positive. Like, we spoke with Paul O'Donovan at MediaKind, and I'm going to talk about piracy again, Nick, because I love it. And one of the things we talked about when it comes to piracy is that you have to convince the user of the value with which they're paying. So I might even spin it to say, Nick, hey, maybe they aren't making any more money than what they made last year, but the fact that they have more users is actually a positive, simply because, more first-party data or less people accessing your content via piracy. Have they found more of a middle point? Or we could go way back in the time machine to one of our favorite podcasts. I think it was David versus Goliath was the name of the podcast, where we talked about PAOK FC. The too long didn't read story on that is Greek Football Club fails to get broadcast deal, so launches their own OTT platform. 12 months later, broadcaster come back in and offers them more money than they made the year before. Maybe Ligue, if they can drive the numbers up, maybe they don't make more money, but they say, here's a subscriber base. And maybe Canal Plus does come back to the table. That's just me, Nick, trying to give it that positive spin.
Yeah, that's definitely a viable play here. I think that's and that would be a great outcome for them. Like, let's be clear on the DAZN situation: is they were making way more money out of the DAZN relationship, but DAZN wasn't making enough money to justify their investment in the media rights, and that was the predicament why but DAZN made the unprecedented move of pulling out of their deal so early. Now, what I think is really important about this moment in time is that having the price so low allows them to try to break consumer behavior of taking the pirated approach and going for something that, look, it's so cheap at 15 a month, I can actually pay that. I'm okay with it. But when it's at the higher price point of 30 or 30 plus, at one stage, if you put all the offers together, it was over 80 or odd euros a month that people would have had to pay to watch all the matches. But just for DAZNs alone, that's enough of a tipping point that consumers say, no, screw you, I'm going to find it by other means. So hopefully, for their benefit, having this low price point will start to shift what is a very piracy-centric market into being more comfortable with paying for access to these rights and for this content. And then down the line, they'll probably start to push up, like we saw with all streamers, if they keep continuing with streaming it themselves and distributing it through carriers, is pushing up that price gradually over time. But one step at a time. And let's see how far they can get by the end of the season. Hopefully they can keep some momentum up.
Like I said, we'll continue to follow it. It's a story that won't go away, Nick. It stays near and dear to our hearts. I'm sure we'll continue to cover it. But next one, flipping back across the pond, starting from 2026 within the U.S., Amazon Prime will now stream the Masters. This is going to complement some of the coverage from ESPN and CBS as well. Paramount Plus is also being involved. Paramount Plus seeming to be everywhere. But Nick, just this seems like to me another example of Amazon doing largely what Amazon does, which is being very selective about picking certain events, never maybe necessarily taking the lion's share of something, but just picking and choosing the right moments that they want to try different things. Is there any reason that shouldn't be the interpretation of this move?
Well, I think it's really interesting because the Masters are actually quite well known in the industry for taking a very unique approach in how they approach their media rights. For example, they actually leave a lot of money on the table for the media rights deals. They, instead of getting the best deal possible, they've been very focused on keeping the control over what is done with those rights rather than a broadcaster paying a premium and then letting them do what they want to do with it. So they have been very good at dictating to CBS how they want the broadcast production delivered, all the little subtle nuances that come with how advertising served during the broadcast. They keep a huge amount of control on that. They've got a long-standing relationship with CBS and indeed Paramount that's been very successful and lauded for the high-quality experience that the Masters does deliver from a broadcasting perspective. And so they haven't gone and sought out numerous media rights partners in the US anyway for quite a long time. And so the fact that they are taking this big step with Amazon is, I think, pretty significant as, again, another example or another moment where you start to see these streamers become more legitimized, even in the most traditional forms of broadcasting relationships like the Masters used to have. And this will give the Masters, again, more visibility. So what was historically a fairly undercovered set of days on the Thursday and Friday of the tournament will now be visible to fans. So I'm very intrigued at why you at the Masters decided to go with Prime Video, because quite frankly, I think everyone would have been pretty keen to get a piece of those rights if they were up for it. And whether there was a significant media rights check attached to it, given they haven't really sought that out from the relationship they have had with CBS. So it's just a very interesting, unique situation that is pretty much an anomaly for the industry to see someone so protective. It is a little bit Wimbledon-esque, I suppose, but even more so.
Well, the one thing you have to respect about Augusta and the Masters, and it's just me, someone likes to eat food, they're notorious for the fact that they've never raised like their food prices, very, from what I've been told. And once you get there, and then it's a not as expensive experience, meaning like you go to most ballparks in America, you're paying like $18 for a beer or something like that, or whatever concessions. So apparently, like, it's not just the media rights, it's the concessions. And to your point as well about the CBS stuff, like I can just hear the Masters on CBS. Like I can just hear the little jingle play in my head because I've heard it for 35 years now. It's very
Yeah.
I can't think of the Masters without the, that CBS little song jingle that they play every time that, we're getting to that time of year.
Yeah, look, they've done a great job with it. The Masters are happy with it. And the Augusta National, which is the golf club basically they play it at, owns that competition as far as I understand. They have no need to really try and squeeze every dollar out of the rights. They rather keep control, make sure that their tournament continues to be the most prestigious in golf. And because of that, they are sitting in the box seat in terms of that position. That it's unquestionable that tournament is the most what would you call it, most influential in the marketplace, and they're in a great position as a result of that. One thing I would say is, though, that does get a lot of coverage, the pricing of the food. But do you know how much it costs to get a ticket to the Masters itself? So it's basically it's almost money can't buy it, but you can buy your way in. So maybe it doesn't cost you an arm and a leg when you're on the ground, but you probably spent an arm and a leg to get there.
Yeah. Well, just some quick facts for those out there. You talked about the expanded coverage. Historically, it's been because of the new streaming deal. Used to be 18 hours of coverage, now 27 hours. That's an increase in 50%. So that's not an insignificant number. We talked about, Sky adding more and more coverage with, football and things like that. So it's not a small number that they're adding. And then just for reference, last year's Masters, they set a record. Now, obviously, that is always going to depend on who's in the finals, how close is it, things like that. But it is certainly a growing commodity. We've talked several times about sort of the PGA's resurgence and how much of that can potentially be on personalities jumping into the YouTube space, growing it. But it is a property overall that seems to be growing, and they're going to be offering more coverage. So just like I said, add some statistical context to some of this as well.
Well, it feels mad, right? That there's the prospect, if they hadn't done this deal, is that there would be a huge chunk of the Masters not really available to watch.
Yeah.
Like the most prestigious tournament would not easily be accessible to fans in the US. So it does kind of feel like a deal had to be done. And now they have a really interesting mix of partners, and haven't got those rights fragmented in different places. What I mean by that is, like, there's not 3 different broadcasters having it on at the same time. It's all exclusive to the broadcasters in question that they're working with. So I have to love their approach, but it's also very idealistic that you don't need to chase the biggest check, which is not how this industry works, fortunately or unfortunately.
No, it is not. So Nick, we're gonna pivot over. Josh Sim on our editorial team does a frequent reoccurring article, the ratings roundup, where he goes through, finds some interesting numbers, facts and figures worth knowing. So we won't go through every single figure that's in there, but definitely something to keep an eye out for as you're adding things to your list of how do I stay on top of the industry. Definitely come back and reference that article.
I'm pretty sure it's exclusive to Sports Pro subscribers as well.
There you go. A reason to go sign up. And if you need that, you can talk to Nick and I. We'll introduce you to the right people to get you sorted so you can be the best in the business and the most informed. So yeah, maybe this is exclusive coverage that you're only getting.
It's about the same price as a monthly subscription for the Liga, for Ligue 1.
There you go. Get on it. No excuses. So the one we'll start with, Nick, is WNBA coverage. And this year and we talked about a little bit earlier in the year, we saw that initial game between the Sky and the Fever, Angel Reese versus Caitlin Clark, which actually ended up being the most watched game of the year, 2.7 million. But across the season, on ESPN and ABC, the games that were publicly broadcast averaged 1.3 million viewers across those 25 games. That's a 6% increase year on year. And across all of their channels, averaged 969,000 viewers per game. So Nick, numbers are going up. And I think one of the other things to mention as well, we asked the question at the beginning of the year, how much of this was the Caitlin Clark effect? How much was it, similar with Tiger and the PGA, Lewis Hamilton in Formula One for a long time. But actually, one of the things is, like, Caitlin Clark, I think, missed like 2/3 of the season. She only played a small portion of the games. I think she maybe only played 13 games across the season.
Yeah.
And they were still managing to drive these numbers. So there's always been talk about, the WNBA, and it's a very interesting time because they're currently going through a CBA where they're asking for more money. So this is probably really positive for them in that conversation to show that those are growing. But Nick, just overall, just the growth, what that means in terms of the fact that they are getting more coverage, is this proof that, we could say the same thing for WSL. If the WSL gets more investment from Sky, like, causation versus correlation. How much is it positive that it wasn't driven exclusively by Caitlin Clark? Just sort of the growth of what you saw this year.
Well, I think the fact that Caitlin Clark wasn't involved is a massive, massive moment for the WNBA, because that was the criticism up until this point, is like, this incredible story around Clark, and that is basically what everyone is following. And the ratings did lean that way. That basically her team was getting more visibility than anyone, and stadiums were selling out, arenas were selling out, etc. along the way as a result of that. But for them to be able to then follow that up and still drive an increase in ratings after that first year success, and the numbers aren't that far away from the NBA, the optics for the WNBA look pretty good right now. Now, when you correlate that with the media rights deal that they have versus what the NBA has, they are only getting a fraction of their audience. But here's where it gets really tricky for me to digest. Now, firstly, you can compare the 969,000 average viewers per game across ESPN, ABC, and CBS, and then compare that with ESPN and ABC with 1.3 million for the for their channels. Like that, how much of that number is because they're on the main networks and just live sport, decent live sports in those channels would already bring that audience to the table? Because across the entire industry, there is innately a general set of growth of audiences in all live sports we're seeing, right? So how much of that's driven just by being in the right place where people are consuming, and how much of it is the WNBA pushing audiences to those platforms? And that's the tricky bit we can't really answer. But nevertheless, the disparity between what they're earning versus what their ratings are, relatively speaking, is quite significant. Now, for those that will quickly point to just the disparity between the NBA and WNBA, let's remember how many extra games the NBA plays each year. 82 games plus playoffs for 32 teams is a very big different prospect to what is it like. I don't even know how it's a very short season for the WNBA comparison. So it is night and day to compare those two properties together because of the relative scale, that you can't just measure every game in isolation as it stands. Nevertheless, they have to be buoyed by that extra increase in interest and visibility.
Well, this was the thing that I said I was going to come back to when we got to the ratings roundup, talking about kind of the Netflix fight and whether it's YouTube or Netflix and the positivity about it, is that we're seeing that across the board, Nick, because we're going to talk about some other statistics of this is the most watched sporting event ever. This was this. Despite the things that we've talked about in the industry being a little nervous because, there's TikTok, there's Netflix, there's Amazon Prime, there's Apple TV, there's Ted Lasso, there's, all these million different TV shows. I think there was perhaps a little bit of a concern that you think a share of wallet and share of time, how people split those things up, was this going to have an effect on live sports? But it doesn't seem like it's necessarily slowing down. There are some spots that everyone can't say it's uniform across the board. But, whether this is for advertisers that, hey, this is still the premium thing to be at, it just seems like there's still a lot of stories that we keep hearing more and more about record-breaking numbers of concurrent viewers, average viewers per minute, or whatever statistics they're talking about now, Nick.
There's a lot out there, right? I think this is the tricky bit for all of us. I think I saw a stat last week that YouTube's consumption's gone up by, I don't know, another 20% of its video. I can't remember if that's the accurate number. It was a pretty big one. Look, I think this is the tricky part for all this. My point with regards to how much is the WNBA driving audience to the platform and how much is the platform driving audience to the WNBA is we'll never really know that comfortably what that actual number is. Like, think about the example we gave with Netflix and the Canelo Crawford fight. They got 41 million viewers. Now, what would happen if Netflix ran the fight, but they didn't give it the visibility on the homepage and the landing page and market it to the level they did? Would that number come down by 10%? Would it come down by 20%? Would it come down by 50%? If they didn't make it easier to find on the platform, how much work would the audience do to find that content on the platform? Or was it just because it was so front and center that people clicked and watched it? So it's so difficult to define things categorically, but there is a lot of devil in the detail in some of these things. I've seen certain shows that ESPN have broadcast, the talk shows, get similar numbers, and they cancel them because they also cost a lot with the talent that they have on the show as well. So there's lots of difficulties just to look at things in isolation. The word nuance is something I use a lot, probably too much. I've been called out by people. There's always devil in the detail, is my point, basically.
Yeah.
And in this instance, there is more to it than just simply the numbers. Shorter seasons, increased visibility. And also, I do think that if you want to look more positively, I think there is a rising tide effect here with Caitlin Clark and that first season, her in the league, more of the stars in the league got more visibility. And I think with that, you get more people following different teams, more people following different athletes. So not just the Caitlin Clark alone was getting all the coverage, getting all the interest from fans. So inevitably, I do think there's more interest in the league, and it's putting more interest in some of the players and the teams that is sticky, that will keep people coming back to the league moving forward now.
You know what? Like I think it also just shows power of personalities in the sense of,
Yeah.
there are people that used to watch golf. Is either they love Tiger, they wanted to see him lose. The reason why I think Jake Paul turned out the Netflix numbers that he did is because people were hoping Mike Tyson were going to knock him out. There's going to be some people that love Caitlin Clark, and there's some people that hope she's going to be proven wrong. And I think there's definitely always that. Hell, even football. I think like Tim Tebow. There's some people that love Tim Tebow. Some people hated Tim Tebow. Like I definitely think it certainly doesn't hurt to have that polarizing figure, and you don't care why they're watching as long as they're watching.
I mean, you've nailed it. Basically, sport is entertainment, and if there's got to be the typical classic storylines that you would see in a movie. Is there a hero and is there a villain here? If there is, you've got a good chance that you'll get more interest following that experience, that event, that moment, rather than just someone dominating. Like we've seen this with, say, Formula One for a while, where Verstappen was just leading and dominating. Normally, we would think, someone so dominant actually drives audience a little bit because people want to see this person do unprecedented things. But if there's no rivalry with anyone else really underneath that's tangible and like legitimate, even if they're dominating, it just loses its fluster. I don't know if fluster is the right word there.
Yeah.
But basically, in the older days of F1, there was always a rivalry with the personalities. There was a bit of hero versus villain. People would go against each other. I just think it is so much more to sports than just the sporting competition alone.
Yeah. Well, some more numbers from that report just to talk about, again, more record-breaking numbers. Amazon's Thursday Night Football had an average of 17.76 million viewers, peaking at 20.35 million, which is up 19% from last year's opening Thursday Night Football game. It does make it Amazon's largest ever stream game, I believe, beating out last year's December game. So, granted, Thursday Night Football, a little bit like boxing. I haven't watched Thursday Night Football's game, which was the Bills and the Dolphins, given how the Dolphins have started the season this year. I imagine they didn't come to those numbers, so those things might fluctuate. But again, positive for Amazon, week one, breaking records. Meanwhile, the Super Bowl rematch between the Eagles and the Chiefs brought in 33.8 million viewers, which would be Fox's largest ever non-Super Bowl audience for a game. So early season, NFL is already going and beating records, which sometimes you just sort of like, how many times can the NFL just keep beating its own records and things like that? But they keep doing it. But I think it just goes to that whole point about the positives of things that we're seeing in sports. I'm going to keep rattling stuff off, Nick. I'm a big college football fan as well. ABC averaged 12.6 million viewers for Georgia versus Tennessee. And I still have Europeans that can't wrap their mind around the fact that college sports is bringing in these sorts of numbers. It's ridiculous. And even one of the other interesting one, Nick's, FIVB, volleyball, sport near and dear to your heart. They put out some FIFA-like numbers saying that they accumulated more than 1.1 billion views across broadcast and digital platforms in China for their world championships. Yeah, big numbers, Nick, big numbers. So all that stuff is in there. There's some more stuff about, NRL coming from your world, back in Australia, having 6.67 million viewers, which is, I believe, is a record viewing of the sport. So Nick, just records on records on records everywhere, just smashing it.
Yeah, the thing is, you always hear about the records. You don't hear about all the ones that aren't hitting those records. I mean, the volleyball one doesn't surprise me too much. But see, they said cumulative viewers. Very clear what that is. That's just a cumulative audience of number of views and content. I can buy that all day. Saying I've reached 2.7 billion fans is a different proposition. Yeah. But anyway, I digress. Now, it is good to see, actually, and the college stuff being available on the zone now globally will be interesting to see how that performs, to see if they will be able to generate any interest from audiences outside of those Americans who are maybe feeling nostalgic and want to follow their favorite college teams. But I think you're going to continue to see numbers and records being shared. The world is buying into live sports at the pointier end. Everyone underneath that top end is the ones that are struggling necessarily to get cut through. But there's ultimately more consumption. There's more consumption of content than ever. And so those records being broken, I don't necessarily think they give us an unequivocal tick of approval that we're on this incredible path of growth. I think it's just a part of this whole situation of where consumption is going up across the board.
Yeah. Well, we're at the end of the episode, Nick. We'll give it more air as we go through. But again, talking about the Sports for Media Summit coming up in Madrid. Over the next month or so, you're going to hear some interviews that we're going to do with some of the key speakers from that event, almost as like a pre-match, pre-fight conversation. But hopefully, because they'll be on the Stream Time podcast, anyone that's been to events, usually those sessions are 25, 30 minutes. We're going to get them for a much longer time. So you're going to hear from some of those key speakers. It includes Sky Deutschland, Tubi, PSG, hoping to get Tim Cocker, who we referred to, getting the YouTuber who got the French rugby rights. He's tentatively said yes, but we're going to be doing more stuff in that build up to the Sports for Media Summit and Madrid, and all these sorts of shifts, all these different changes, advertisement versus subscription, all that will certainly be heavily covered in that event coming up. So we're just going to keep bringing things to you as we build towards that event.
We sure are. There's lots going on there at that event, and the more I'm really excited. Actually, I'm really excited about that event because I think we made some big changes this year to make sure we went much deeper on other topics than we have traditionally, and that really seems to have been a smart move because the stuff we've been covering of late, is almost was even way deeper, going on things like YouTube and streaming than I ever thought we would, to the level we have been. So excited to really attend that event. We've got some great content on stage. I'm going to be speaking to Bundesliga about their strategy, which is obviously very topical given what they've just done in the UK. The Zone CTO talking about how they delivered the Club World Cup. So I might see if I can get a few questions in there somehow, given what we did last week. But really looking forward to that event, that's for sure.
Brilliant. Awesome. And everyone, we will catch you on the next episode.